Yo, what up guys, I'm Sammy and welcome back to the Soul Drop, and this is my initial comparison between the Adidas Don Issue 6 and the Adidas Don Issue 7. So of course this is Donovan Mitchell's 6th signature shoe with Adidas, and this is his 7th signature shoe, right? And Donovan Mitchell actually has had a very nice signature shoe line in my personal opinion. Amazing performance, amazing price. Besides the Don Issue 1, 2, and 3, I didn't really like those too much, but from the 4 onwards, it actually has been extremely nice. And if you guys didn't know, the Don Issue 6 was one of my favorite hoop shoes of last year, right? And as far as the pricing goes, the Don Issue 6 retailed for 120 bucks, but it's on crazy sale because it's such an old shoe that I've seen some sales for the Don Issue 6 on Adidas.com for like 60-70 bucks. So I'll try to leave a link in the description box for that. But yeah, the Don Issue 7, they actually kept it the exact same price, which I think is amazing, at 120 bucks. So if you guys do want to cop either of these shoes, again, I'll try to leave the free link in the description box. And if you do choose to get either of these shoes, it does help me out if you buy it through the free link in the description box. But anyways, let's get it started right off with the tracciones, right? So for both of these colorways that I have, here in the Don Issue 6, I have a fully translucent outsole, and same thing here in the Don Issue 7. And as far as the actual pattern goes, the pattern is pretty much the exact same. We got a circle that kind of like circles out on itself, but like where the kind of like intersecting lines are, the shape is a little bit different, but other than that is very similar, right? And also here in the heel is a little bit different, but overall a very similar traction pattern. And the Don Issue 6 for me had amazing traction. On a clean court, I had an amazing bite, and also picked up pretty minimal dust as well, which I liked. And the Don Issue 7, just trying it on my wood floors, I haven't played in these yet, it feels extremely similar as well. And of course, while I got this shoe in today, I was trying the Don Issue 6 as well on my apartment floors, and it felt extremely similar as far as the bite goes, right? So the bite seems really good so far here in the Don Issue 7. And also as far as the dust performance goes, it feels extremely similar as well. I was walking around a good amount in my apartment. I have 2 dogs. There's a good amount of dog hair all the time, and there's dust and stuff like that. And I was walking around a lot and picked up a lot of that, but still it was biting through all that pretty dang well, and I still had a pretty good bite on my wood floors, which isn't the case for most shoes that I get in, you know what I mean? So it feels like this will have really strong and really good dust performance as well. And also the squeak sounds pretty dang similar. You know what I mean? Maybe it's because it's a very similar traction pattern, but yeah, it's a pretty loud and a very high-pitched squeak as well, here in the Don Issue 6 as well as here in the Don Issue 7. Of course, squeak has nothing to do with performance, but it's very similar. And as far as the durability goes, I mean, yeah, they're both probably not the best option. It feels very similar as well. The grooves are on the thinner side of things, and also they're pretty pliable, right? So yeah, I feel like if you do play on an outdoor court, it'll rip off pretty dang easily. And yeah, it just won't be super durable. So and also another thing is that they are both decoupled outsoles as well, meaning the forefoot and heel are separate. We got 2 different kind of like pods pretty much for the outsole in both of these shoes. So yeah, the traction is feeling very nice here in the Don Issue 7, and the 6 was like top tier, right? So there's that. Moving on to the heel to toe transition, it does feel overall pretty smooth. However, the 7 feels a little bit smoother and a little bit bouncier, especially in the heel, right? So here in the heel, both of the shoes have a pretty much a fully exposed midsole, right? So nothing's caged for the actual midsole, which is of course very nice. And here in the Don Issue 6, there is a lot of compression. It's super duper soft, so it does feel still very smooth in the heel. However, the Don Issue 7 is using Light Strike Pro, and actually it feels nicer than Light Strike, just right now. It has a softer feel, albeit it is a little bit thicker though. You are a little bit higher up off the ground, so you have a little bit more cushion, it feels like, but it's softer. It feels like more plush, and it feels like it wants to like kind of absorb a little bit more impact and a little bit more of that force, you know what I mean? Also, it feels a little bit bouncier too. It just has a little bit more cushion, which feels extremely nice in the heel, So that feels great, right? As far as the forefoot goes, it's very similar. We have a pretty nice curved shape, and then here in the Don Issue 6, we actually have a very nice curved shape, you know what I mean? But it's not super springy though. It's more of a more flexible feel. It's not super flexible like the Luka 4, like the Sabrina 2, where it's just like super easy to flex. The Don Issue 6 is a little bit stiffer than that, you know what I mean? But it still has that ability to flex, you know? But then here in the Don Issue 7, it's a little bit stiffer, but then also has a little bit more of a springy feel as well, which I do like a little bit better here in Don Issue 7. So that feels like a little bit of an improvement, you know what I mean? Even though the Don Issue 6 is still a very smooth feel, you know what I mean? So there's that. Moving on to the cushioning setup. So here in the heel for the Don Issue 7, maybe it's just thicker, but then the Lightstrike Pro just feels softer, you know what I mean? So it has a nice bit of compression and also a nice little bounce as well. Here in the Don Issue 6, it's also using Lightstrike Pro, but then it's a little bit lower to the ground, right? So it's a little bit thinner, but also feels a little bit kind of like stiffer for some reason. Even to the touch, just squeezing with my finger has a little bit less, you know, compression, you know, comparing it to the Don Issue 7, which is just super duper soft. Look at this, it's so soft. But then the Don Issue 6, it's still kind of soft, but then it's not as soft as the Don Issue 7. So it is a little bit stiffer here in the Don Issue 6, right? Now moving on to the cushioning setup. So as far as the foam goes, both of these shoes are using a Lightstrike Pro. However, the Don Issue 7 has a really nice soft feel. I don't know what they did with this foam setup, because it actually has a softer feel to it, right? And here in the Don Issue 6, it still has a nice soft compression here in the heel, which feels great. However, it's not as soft, you know what I mean? So it just feels a little bit stiffer. It has a more of like a responsive feel, and also has slightly better core feel, right? Just slightly. So first of all, the Luka 4 has one of the best core feels that you can get right now, right? So Luka 4, Sabrina 2, you know, Tatum 3, Jaw 2 all have amazing core feel, but with more like a minimal cushioning setup, right? The Don Issue 6 is a little bit higher up off the ground. However, it feels a little bit softer, you know what I mean, as far as the heel compression goes, but not by much, you know? But also the underfoot cushion is still a little bit stiffer, but here in the heel it's kind of soft, right? But then if you want to go a little bit thicker, you got the Don Issue 7. So as far as the core feel goes, I definitely wouldn't say it's amazing here in Don Issue 7, but it's not terrible either, you know? I would say it's around average, right? Prioritizing a little bit more of a cushion heavy setup. So here in the heel, you have a crazy amount of heel compression, which feels really, really nice, very, very comfortable. And for some reason, it just feels like it wants to absorb more, you know, impact, you know what I mean? A little bit more force. So it feels softer. It has more of like a marshmallow feel as well. And also feels a little bit bouncier too compared to the Don Issue 6. So it just has a better feel overall here in the heel. And also because it is thicker, maybe I feel like it has a better like underfoot feel as well in the heel. So you know, when I was just like walking around, it felt a little bit softer right underneath my heel in the Don Issue 7 compared to the Don Issue 6, even though the Don Issue 6 is still kind of nice, right? Also here in the forefoot, it feels a little bit softer as well, which feels great, right? So I would say, you know, if you want more of like a stiffer, more responsive setup with slightly better core feel, then Don Issue 6 feels better so far right now. But again, like the Don Issue 7 doesn't have terrible core feel, right? And if you want a little bit more of a well-cushioned setup, something softer, more comfortable, and something that has a little bit more of a bouncier feel, especially here in the heel so far, I would say the Don Issue 7 feels a little bit better. So, and yeah, in my personal opinion, I like the Don Issue 7 so far right now. So there is the cushioning setup there. Moving on to the upper. So the Don Issue 6 is using an extremely thin kind of like textile mesh material. And we do have some overlays here at the tip of the toe, but overall, look at this. It's just a super thin, pretty well ventilated material, right? But here in the Don Issue 7, we have this shroud, right? And you can see just how robust this material is. It's really actually pretty thick. So it doesn't feel minimal really at all. However, it does have a really nice, comfortable, cozy feel to it, right? So they change it up a lot coming from the 6 to the 7. And again, it just depends on what you like. You know, they're both comfortable. They both conform to your foot like pretty dang well. It's just if you want more of a minimal feel, obviously go with the 6. If you want more of a comfortable and cozy feel, go with the 7, right? And then here for the 6, we have this really thick plastic piece that goes pretty much around the entire shoe, and that adds a good amount of structural rigidity to the shoe, which I do like. And then same thing here in the Don Issue 7. You know what I mean? You actually have like a material that goes around, just like the Don Issue 6, but obviously it's not as thick or as stiff, but still has really good structural rigidity because of the shroud material. As far as the tongue goes, it's around the same. They're both not super well padded, and also they're both half booty construction tongues, giving you a better overall one-to-one fit. And then here in the ankle area, however, the Don Issue 7 is so freaking nice because you do have Achilles pads, 4 to be exact, and it just feels so cozy, so comfortable, and the heel lockdown feels really good as well here in the back of the shoe. So yeah, not only is this kind of like textile material shroud really cozy and comfortable here in the forefoot and midfoot, but also because of the Achilles pads, it adds so much to that comfort as well. The Don Issue 6 obviously doesn't have that, you know, you just have a regular kind of like ankle part, you know what I mean? And you do have this kind of like ankle pad a little bit, you know what I mean? Achilles pad just a tiny bit. It kind of like wraps around, but it's not super cozy, you know? So yeah, I mean, as far as like what I like, I think I like the Don Issue 7 a little bit more. I mean, also I do like the Don Issue 6 because it's so minimal, and I do like having a minimal material, but the Don Issue 7 so far feels so comfortable, and also I don't really mind it being a little bit thicker because, you know, first of all, it's still soft, but it does have a nice like sturdy and supportive feel while still feeling really comfortable and cozy and soft, you know what I mean? It does all of that really well, besides it being like, you know, feeling minimal. So yeah, I really like how the Don Issue 7 feels. And now moving on to the fit, so I went true to size for the Don Issue 6 and it fits me very, very well. It's a really nice snug fit. You know, here in the toe box, super snug. Lengthwise I'm good going true to size, and widthwise it is slightly narrow for me. However, here in the Don Issue 7, I did go up half a size, right? And it definitely does have a little bit of length, you know, compared to the Don Issue 6. However, it is a snug fit here in the toe box, and because of this kind of like robust material, I don't think it'll stretch out too much, you know what I mean? And also width-wise, it's good for me as well. You know what I mean? It's like slightly narrow. So yeah, I feel like if you want a super snug fit, then you should be fine going true to size here in the Don Issue 7. But again, be careful with that because it's still a snug fit for me going up half a size here in the Don Issue 7. Overall, if I had to nitpick, I would say the Don Issue 6 fits me just a tiny bit better. It's just a little bit more snug because I did go true to size, but the Don Issue 7 is still nice for me going up half a size. So there is a fit there. It's just a very, very similar fit, you know what I mean? And now moving on to the support and lockdown, I mean, the Don Issue 6, I had zero issues, you know what I mean? Like torsional support felt extremely good, you know? And also lateral support felt really good. You know, you have the foam coming up just a tiny bit, and also the overall material is also supported, you know what I mean? So forefoot felt good. Midfoot, again, same thing here in the Don Issue 7. We have this kind of like plastic piece, and then here in the heel, internal TPU heel counter. So I had no issues here in the Don Issue 6, and Don Issue 7, it feels very, very similar as well, with a like more sturdy feeling upper, you know what I mean? So lateral containment feels also really nice here in the Don Issue 7. Also, as far as lateral stability goes, let's see which shoe's wider. Actually seems literally the exact same, you know what I mean? So I had zero issues here in the Don Issue 6, and the Don Issue 7 feels really nice as well. And the heel lockdown, like I didn't have any issues, you know, of course, with the Don Issue 6, but the Don Issue 7 just really locks my heel down with the Achilles pads, you know what I mean? So that feels really nice. And I would say, you know, both of these shoes feel really supportive. You know what I mean? It has a lot more of a sturdier feel compared to, you know, the traditional like guard shoe from like modern day basketball shoes, you know, like the Luka 4, Sabrina 2 and all that, you know? But the Don Issue 7 feels a little bit like they took it to the next level, you know what I mean? Don Issue 6, again, feels very supportive, very sturdy and stuff like that, but you take it to another level and then you got the Don Issue 7 because I would say the upper, you know what I mean? So there's that. Moving on to the weight of the shoe, I mean, obviously the Don Issue 6 is gonna be lighter, right? Yeah, 11.35 ounces. Let's check the Don Issue 7. 13.1 ounces, so almost 2 ounces heavier, a full 2 ounces heavier for the Don Issue 7, which is kind of crazy, you know what I mean? And you definitely notice that. Again, they're just very different feeling shoes, which is weird, you know, to have just going from one shoe to the next in your signature shoe line. But yeah, again, it's like the disparity of both of these shoes. Like if you want more of the minimal feel, lightweight feel, but still have really good support, then Don Issue 6, you know? If you want more of a cozy, softer feel, especially not only from the upper, but from the cushion as well, and you don't mind like a heavier shoe, and you prioritize also more of like a supportive feel, then the Don Issue 7 definitely feels like it'll be the better option, you know what I mean? And I'm kind of torn, you know what I mean? I like both, you know? Sometimes I want a minimal shoe, And sometimes I want something a little bit cozier with a little bit more cushion, you know? And they're both very, very nice. I feel like they do what they need to do very, very well in their own, in like kind of like individual category, you know what I mean? So there is the weight there. Moving on to the aesthetics. Ooh, I don't know. And also another cool thing about these two colorways is that like they're pretty similar. You know, you got the Volt, you got the pink, you got a little bit of the purple. You know what I mean? So I guess, you know, these are both the first colorways of, you know, both of these shoes, obviously. So yeah, what do you guys think? I feel like I like the Don Issue 7 a little bit better because it's just a cleaner look with the shroud, you know, with the zipper, but the Don Issue 6 also still looks really nice to me. So tell us what you guys think looks better down in the comment section below. So wrapping things up, yeah, as of right now, obviously, again, I haven't fully tested the Don Issue 7 out, but as of right now, I can't really pick. Again, they both feel really, really nice, and they both feel like, well, at least the Don Issue 7 feels like it'll be really nice for that like kind of cozy, supportive, soft, you know, vibe, you know what I mean? While the Don Issue 6 is more like a really sturdy, responsive, more kind of like stiff feel, you know? So yeah, again, it's kind of hard to compare and say which one's better because they're just so different feeling to me. But again, I do like both right now as far as the initial comparison goes. So anyways, that about concludes this video. Again, if you guys do want to cop either of these shoes, I tried to leave in the free link in the description box, but that's it. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.